Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and now Vice President of Football and Research at Sports Info Solutions, joined by Aaron Schatz, the godfather of football analytics and the founder of Football Outsiders. As always, we've got our producer, Justin Stein, on the controls, even if we're all in slightly different locations. Well, I guess Aaron's in the same location, but not too much of a shakeup for Off the Charts. I don't think we can complain, really.
No, working from home is the same, except for all of the worries and all of the paying attention to the news. But I hope everybody who listens to us is staying nice and socially distanced and listening to everything on the news that they're supposed to be doing. And otherwise, we're going to keep this podcast as sort of an island in the storm and talk some football and give you a break from being pounded by the news, which I think we all are these days.
Yeah, and thankfully, we've been a little bit pounded by free agency news, which has gone on as originally scheduled. Not really sure based on – it sounded like at first the NFL was trying to say that the players wouldn't accept a pushback timeline, but then it sounded like the players weren't necessarily proposed that to begin with. So another one of those weird communication things with the NFL and PA.
And they can't make things official until players have physicals, and players can't have physicals until some of this quarantine stuff gets lifted. But we basically know a lot of who signed who.
Then that's a great segue into Tom Brady, who I'm dying to hear your thoughts on. I know all of the listeners are. And you just mentioned the physical. The most recent news I saw, it's about 1 p.m. here on Thursday the 19th as we record. The most recent news I saw was that there was an agreement made between the Bucs and Tom Brady to find an independent physician who would do the physical. I think today they were planning on doing it. So it sounds like things are moving forward there. He's moving to Tampa Bay. What are your thoughts? What do you think of the fit? And just reactions in general from a 20-year relationship that you've had with Tom Brady, the football player?
Well, I mean, Brian Curtis wrote an article for The Ringer this week about sort of the Brady-Belichick writing tree, not just all of those coaches that come out of Belichick, but all of the writers who got their start in Boston writing about the Patriots dynasty, whether they're national people like Ian Rappaport and Albert Breer, or local, Patriots people who now have more of a national following like Mike Reese or Greg Bedard, or people like Bill Simmons, who, basically expanded his following during the Patriots years.
Absolutely.
Or the Barstool Sports people. Well, he didn't include me, but I would say that Football Outsiders is part of that expansion. I got into doing this because I had questions about the Patriots in 2002, and I, in some ways, was able to promote myself in part because I had a connection to New England. So this is obviously a huge change. But for me personally, and for doing this for a living in New England, going to Patriots games, being in the press box, it's just a gigantic change. As a Patriots fan, it's very sad. You didn't want Tom Brady to finish his career anywhere else. I think I said on the show 2 weeks ago, if he had to go somewhere else, I would have chosen San Francisco just because, it had the same, the idea of him going home was at least sort of mentally acceptable. That being said, at least it's not a rival. Although the Patriots do play Tampa Bay in 2021, assuming that Tom Brady plays 2 more years. That'll be a huge, huge media to-do. But otherwise, this is not a team that the Patriots really worry about. So it is possible for Patriots fans, I think, to both root for Brady and root for the Patriots going forward. As an analyst, the first question is, would the Patriots have been able to fit him under the cap? If he's getting $30 million, they're pretty cap strained. That's why all their free agents keep leaving. So I think that Belichick just didn't want to pay $30 million a year for a declining 43-year-old quarterback. So now the question turns to how he fits in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I want to circle back before we get to that Tampa Bay fit first. You really made that's an interesting point about the writers that have come out of sort of the Patriots circle, yourself included. And I'm curious kind of your opinion on what led to that. It's probably this confluence of factors, but there's part of it that the Patriots are very good, and so they're in the national spotlight, and so people get more opportunities. But also it seems that there was just some really good analysts that happened to be in the same place at the same time, and that had its own effect that kind of probably multiplied on itself. And then also maybe the effect of Belichick being in New England and doing this intellectually advanced form of football that you didn't see in as many other places. And maybe the opportunity to cover that is also part of what precipitated the advancement that's kind of come out of the Belichick Brady years in the media.
Yeah, I mean, think about the people who came just out of the Metro West Daily News, I mean, which is a tiny paper that covers the western suburbs, but that's where Tom Curran and Mike Reese came out of. I mean, I think some of it, Brian Curtis talked about it in his article. There's also a lot of people in the national sports media who got their start covering the 90s Cowboys. And there were a lot of people in the national basketball media who got their start covering the 80s Lakers. I think it just happens when you have a dynasty that you get more attention for good writers who are covering that team. They're going to get more chances to go national because also their knowledge, think of all the times that, NBC nationally would have to pick up something from Tom Curran or, people from the Boston, NFL Network decided they had to have a dedicated reporter here. So they hired Mike Girardi.
Right.
I think that being associated with the team that is going to require coverage just gives people a lot of opportunity. But we have been lucky also to have a lot of really good reporters covering this team. I mean, Mike Reese, even though he's still Patriots specific now for ESPN, but I can't think of a better beat reporter at the job of beat reporter, right? He's not an analyst. He's not a stat analyst like me. He's not a film analyst. But the job of beat reporter is a specific job, and there's nobody who's better at it than Mike Reese.
Well, that's another good transition into the ESPN beat reporter that's going to be getting an opportunity going forward these days is Jenna Lane down in Tampa Bay. And the Tampa Bay Tom Brady fit, we talked about it a little bit 2 weeks ago. It is the no risk it, no biscuit Bruce Arians, which seems at odds with the Tom Brady West Coast for life. I want to throw it 3 yards downfield almost exclusively.
Right. I should put an asterisk on West Coast for life because he hasn't played in a West Coast system as far as the terminology. It's the Earhart-Perkins system as far as terminology. But the mindset has certainly been much more about spreading the field horizontally than spreading the field vertically, especially in the last couple of years.
Where do we go with that? It sounds like the Bucs are going to be really getting out of the way, letting Tommy kind of run things the way that he's comfortable with. It sounds like it makes sense to me, and it sounds like probably how anybody in their right mind would handle Tom Brady, right? You're not going to really try to explain to him how you need him to do things to conform to you. But do you think it can work?
It's going to be really interesting. I don't know how much. If you assume that Jameis Winston was very likely to see some sort of regression towards the mean on his interception totals, and that Brady, there probably is going to be a little bit of bounce back from last year's decline, even though he's at such an advanced age, but probably not that much because he's at such an advanced age. I don't know how much Brady is necessarily can be expected to be much better from what they got from Winston, but it's going to be much different. Winston last year, average depth of target, 10.7 yards. Brady, 7.8. And that's not a one-year thing because of the lack of weapons he had last year. The year before, they won the Super Bowl, and his average depth of target was 8.1. So his offense has always been based a lot of. I mean, yes, he'll take his shots down the field, and he certainly did, 12 years ago when he had Randy Moss around. But it's based on a lot of these little slot receiver, Julian Edelman whip patterns, a lot of option routes, short stuff, a lot of using his running back. Tampa Bay is going to have to find themselves a pass-catching running back. Dion Lewis is free agent now, so perhaps they'll go after him. It's a very different offense from what Tampa Bay Buccaneers and what Arians has run in the past. I also think you have to expect that if they do run more of an Arians-style offense and Brady throws deep more often, he's going to throw more interceptions. Brady likes to take care of the ball. When he's incomplete, he tends to be incomplete in such a way that it's as far away from the defender as possible so that there's not an interception. That's how he keeps his interception totals low. If you're going deep all the time, you're just going to throw more interceptions. It's just what's going to happen.
Right. There's going to be a relationship there. I'll be fascinated to see how it kind of plays out because I'm not sure where he's at skill set wise. We've talked about some of the stats that separate his performance out from kind of the team. And yes, there's been a decline, but it's probably overstated how rapid the decline was last year. This has been happening for a few years. And he's still at least an above average quarterback, in the NFL. And the market shows that to an extent. So I'm fascinated by it. I like Bruce Arians. I can see the fit there working out. I'm curious about some things kind of around the edges with it. How do they round out the offensive line? That seems to me to be the glaring thing that is kind of left over for them. Will the defense maintain where it was last year? We've talked about how good their defense was, how shockingly good their run defense was in particular. Can they continue to have that kind of defensive performance, or is that the sort of thing like we've talked about a million times where you're not going to expect the same kind of consistency in defensive performance from year over year? A lot of kind of interesting questions, but I think they're giving themselves a really good shot, and I do like the fit. So begs the question, where does that leave Jameis Winston? Because we're seeing a lot of the kind of the chairs in musical chairs start to disappear, and he's looking like he might be left without one.
I'll say one more thing first about Brady, which is to tie things in with the current virus problem. I do worry a little bit about Brady on a new team with new receivers and having to either adapt his offense to Arians or have to adapt himself to the Arians offense with a reduced offseason. It is very likely we are going to have reduced or possibly no OTAs at all. And that is going to be a lot of the practice time of practicing those option routes and trying to be on the same page mentally. I think you're going to see a lot, especially early in the year, where Brady's receivers are not where he thinks they're going to be.
Yeah, I think there's a good possibility of that. You got to expect that they'll be getting together, doing all their kind of off-season whatever stuff. And I think they'll find a slot guy to fit in that'll be...
They have Scott Miller. Scott Miller could be that guy. He was a 6th-round pick last year.
There's some potential there. I could also see Brady getting somebody he's been familiar with. The slot receivers don't tend to break the bank too much. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. And then Antonio Brown, the open question also, we didn't even talk about him. Could see that becoming a thing again somehow, which is
same thing you'd always say about Antonio Brown, which is the football talent is undeniable, although he's getting a little up there in age. And I suppose he could even fit that slot receiver position, right? Because he's such a route technician. It would feel like you're almost wasting him a little bit doing that, but he would fit there. But at the same time, likely to come with a big suspension at the beginning of the year from the league. And I just think is bad PR. I mean, Tampa Bay fans won't care. They have Tom Brady. They won't care about what Antonio Brown does to women in his spare time. But the rest of us will care a little bit.
Yeah, I agree there. All right, let's move forward. Jameis, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. First of all, it would be so much fun to see him land in New England, to see what the Belichick would do with a quarterback so unbelievably different from Tom Brady, but I don't see that happening. And I don't know where the logical landing place is for Jameis Winston at this point.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of vacuum. I think the teams that have the biggest openings at quarterback right now, you just named one of them. I know you've kind of been on the record saying you don't think Stidham's the guy.
No, I think Stidham he's just a guy. Yeah.
But is he the bridge, or is it too expensive to bring in any sort of quarterback for the Patriots in their cap situation now? Is this draft and play right away type situation? Where do you see the Patriots going if it's not Winston?
I wanted Teddy Bridgewater, but Teddy Bridgewater is now going to Carolina. We can talk about that in a little bit. There's been some talk about Andy Dalton that is excessively unexciting.
Yeah.
Like it cannot be less exciting than that, but I guess it might be logical as a bridge to someone that they draft this year. I honestly have to assume that Bill Belichick has some sort of plan. The plan seems to be to go cheap. One other possibility is that it looks like Carolina is having trouble trading Cam Newton. It's very likely Cam Newton gets cut, which means the Patriots could sign him probably for less money and without giving up any kind of compensatory draft pick. I have no idea what Cam Newton's medicals look like now, and I don't know whether a team can get a good idea of what Cam Newton's medicals look like given the virus situation. But there is this sort of sense out there in the media that Belichick is very mobile quarterback curious. That he would like to have the next quarterback be someone who's more mobile. Stidham is more mobile. Jacoby Brissett was more mobile. Someone who could run a more mobile offense. So Newton to the Patriots would be also unbelievably fascinating.
Way more interesting than Andy Dalton there. I think if you're going to go for Dalton, you might as well just roll with Stidham. And if he's that terrible, treat it as a tank and make your play for Trevor Lawrence.
I mean, no disrespect to Andy Dalton, but I feel almost the same way.
All right, let's circle back on one of those names you mentioned, Teddy Bridgewater, a guy that I've loved since he came out. Really happy to see him get a nice deal here with the Panthers, getting the kind of money that should see him get at least 1 year as the starting quarterback there. It was about $33 million guaranteed, I think, out of the $60+ million that on the 3-year contract. So kind of guaranteeing a year and a half of worth of money basically to him. I love the fit. I love the idea of how he could fit into that offense. Obviously, Joe Brady, the nice connection from when they were in New Orleans together. A guy you wanted. I take it that you like that move for the Panthers.
I do, and the way that it's structured, if Bridgewater turns out to be really good in that offense, that they can go with him for a while. And if it's not, and they end up losing a bunch of games, and it looks like they're tearing their defense apart. So nothing really stops them from drafting a quarterback next year at the top of the draft if they have a pick at the top of the draft in 2021.
Right. It's like Teddy Bridgewater's got a bridge plus contract in that he can kind of play his way into becoming the guy, but otherwise they can move on really in 2 years.
It's a little bit like what the Colts did with Jacoby Brissett's extension last year, where they were in position where if Brissett proved himself, he could be the guy. If he didn't prove himself, which he didn't, they could either draft someone, or since it doesn't look like they're going to be in position to draft one of the top 3 guys, go out and sign Phillip Rivers.
Interesting one there. And then let's talk about Phillip Rivers to the Colts. So
let's talk about Phillip Rivers with an offensive line.
Yeah, it's really exciting, actually. I think that some of the people that think that Phillip Rivers' play has really gone downhill over the last few years. He certainly was never mobile. Now is minus mobility. But with an offensive line, I still think this is a guy that can throw the ball all over the field. And I think this fit with the Frank Reich offense getting kind of reacquainted with the old gang, I love the way that this could play out for the Colts.
It went downhill in 1 year. That's it. It's not that he's gone downhill the last few years. Phillip Rivers, 3rd in the league in passing DYAR in 2018. It's one down year. And by the way, his numbers last year are better than Brady's and about what Matt Ryan did. Matt Ryan also has great weapons. And Rivers did about what Matt Ryan did, and Matt Ryan, with Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley and Austin Hooper. So I think that Rivers can absolutely bounce back, or he could get old. I mean, it's really hard to predict because it's hard to predict how quarterbacks age, given the way Breeze and Brady have aged.
Right. You never know with the 38-year-old guy. There's very little precedence before these last few quarterbacks of what that's looked like. But he could fit in with a nice Colts team there, some good young talent. They still have all kinds of cap room to do even more if they want to. They did trade the first-round pick to get DeForest Buckner. So an interesting pickup there. Definitely bolsters things, but sacrificing a little bit of currency, certainly. The Colts are a team that I think is to be reckoned with, especially when everybody else in their division's giving away players for free.
Yeah. I mean, I understand that a player's contract is part of his trade value, but like the Jarrell Casey trade was weird. And of course, the DeAndre Hopkins trade there's not even a salary dump in it. That David Johnson's salary is almost as big as Hopkins' salary. It is one of the worst trades I can remember. And I don't know a single person who's come out. I don't know a single person who even says that trade is even, let alone is positive about it from the Houston perspective.
Right. You can find ways to be like apologetic about it a little bit if you, oh, well, you have to pay him now. And there was a power struggle and this and that. But like, aside from Michael Irvin bombshells, I haven't
If there
heard
was a
any.
power struggle, how could you not get more? How could you not get more when Stephon Diggs goes to Buffalo and they get a first and a fifth?
Right.
How can you not get more than a second for and a running back nobody wanted for DeAndre Hopkins? It boggles the mind.
If Hopkins went for a 1 and a 5, we'd still be saying that sounded like not enough for DeAndre Hopkins. If Diggs went for a 2, that might be more understandable, I think, to an outside observer at least. But the way both of those trades went absolutely shocked me in terms of the value that you were able to get.
Yeah, I completely. I think, yeah, the Hopkins. There's nobody who's at all positive about it. And I mean, I even said on Twitter, I said on Monday that there needed to be 2 different Twitters, one for virus news and one for just dunking on Bill O'Brien. Because like there was so much dunking. It was a slam dunk festival on Bill O'Brien after that trade. And nobody's positive about it.
Okay, one more for you. How about Ryan Tannehill getting paid by the Titans? It's just shocking to me when you see those numbers. And in effect, he's guaranteed 3 years and $90 million.
That's the risk.
R.I.P. Titans?
No, I mean, no, because we don't know. That's the whole point is we don't know. What if Tannehill is as good as he was last year? And he's probably not. But what if he's almost as good as he was last year? Then that's a pretty good quarterback to have. And at that money, given that when you're a free agent, you're going to get paid, that's a pretty good quarterback to have. If he can be most of what he was last year. But that's the risk. And that's why I liked the idea of giving him the franchise tag. Yes, that's a risk too. Because that means that if it turns out that he is as good as he was last year, you're going to have to pay him even more in future years. But at least it gives you a full season to figure out whether he is.
Yeah, it seems tough. I saw some NFL players reacting to it, and when you have somebody like Derrick Henry who ends up getting franchised, and somebody like Ryan Tannehill who's getting paid multiples of the amount that Derrick Henry is going to get, it creates a weird team building situation. It creates a weird dynamic, especially when I don't think anybody would try to say that Tannehill was more important to the team last year than Derrick Henry was, even with the importance of the quarterback position as compared to running backs.
Once you've paid Tannehill, then I think the question of whether you franchise Henry is an interesting one, because there is an argument for franchising running backs, because the idea is you can use up another year of their prime without having to sign them to a long-term contract that extends into their decline phase. But I think the question of which one of them to franchise, there was no question in my mind. I would have franchised Tannehill.
Yeah, if you're going to commit $90 million, I'd rather, as ill-advised as paying a running back might be, commit less than $90 million to Derrick Henry, or less than $50 million, or less than $30 million if possible.
I would have honestly let Henry walk.
It's an interesting one there. Good for Ryan Tannehill, I guess, on that one. And then before we move on, I want to talk about a few guys that are kind of moving into either backup or competitive roles. I think that Marcus Mariota competing with Derek Carr could be interesting in Las Vegas. Case Keenum going to the Browns as a backup is a kind of interesting push there behind Baker Mayfield, and some familiarity with that coaching staff as well. And then the big one, Nick Foles getting traded to the Bears, I think, meaning that's got to be the end of Mitch Trubisky pretty soon.
Is Nick Foles really better than Mitch Trubisky? So the regular season, the last 3 regular seasons, Trubisky has had better numbers than Nick Foles.
So what I think ends up happening here is that this staff, the guys that are familiar with Foles from their time together in Philadelphia, the Bill Lazors and the people like that, I think they're going shotgun almost exclusively. I think they're going with a ton of read option, ton of RPOs, spread the field horizontally, doing the stuff that Nick Foles is really good at. I think you need to be a really specific system in order to make Nick Foles work. I think we've seen that throughout his career. I think that he can be a pretty good quarterback in certain systems, and he can be a below average quarterback in other systems. And I have no belief in Mitch Trubisky at this point. If anything, maybe it pushes him, and maybe he can fight and win the job. And I'm sure that's what Ryan Pace and company would prefer anyway. But the fourth round pick, nice little trade right there. And I think they end up going with the sort of devil that they know, which I think this is a coaching staff that knows how to get Nick Foles to a passable level of performance. And I think the real hope in Chicago is let's be awesome everywhere else and have a passable quarterback. It's hard to argue against that, I think, based on the way Trubisky's trended over the last few years.
Except, is it Nick Foles really better than Mitchell Trubisky? I mean, Mitchell Trubisky has had better numbers than Nick Foles for the last 3 years in the regular season. You're counting a lot on that postseason and what that postseason was. And as far as being in an offense that's designed for him, isn't that what was supposed to happen in Jacksonville? Was that wasn't DeFilippo there, and that they were gonna run an offense that was similar to what Foles ran in the Super Bowl year? And in the limited amount of time that he played, he wasn't that good. So why are we suddenly expecting so much more in Chicago?
It's interesting. I don't know that we're expecting like a top half of the league type of quarterback, but if Nick Foles can be the 20th best quarterback in the league, I think that's a lot better than what Trubisky's been. So I like that upside. I certainly like Nick Foles as an upgrade over the backup that they had in there because there was no competition coming at all. So I think it's at least a move in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, of course, we're counting a lot here on the sort of emotional impact of being competed with. And I have no idea what the actual impact of that is. Like, we believe that there is an emotional impact from that, but it's not something anybody has ever tried to measure, or I don't know if it's something anybody could measure. Any
needle move for you at all in terms of Case Keenum to the Browns or Mariota to the Raiders?
He's going to the Browns to just be a backup. Mariota to the Raiders is a little interesting, except Carr was really good last year. Like, Carr was quietly really good last year. And I don't think Mariota is suddenly – if the problem is that Carr has too short an average depth of target, Mariota is not going to change that.
Okay, good stuff. Any running backs that you wanted to talk about besides Derrick Henry, of course, who we talked about getting franchised? Any interesting running back movement that you wanted to talk about?
I think the interesting thing is the non-movement. I think the fact that Melvin Gordon has been signed by nobody is just another sign of what's going on in the running back market and the impact that analytics have had on how teams feel about running backs, that there's not a rush to sign this guy who was a first round pick and has good performance, and he bet on himself with his holdout, and boy did he lose.
Yeah, really interesting to see the way the running back market has shifted, the way they're being handled completely. And I don't know that there was much in the CBA that addressed it. I checked up on the full document.
No, I don't think there's anything that treats running backs any different from any other position.
So interesting to see how that plays out.
The problem is they need to have their own negotiators. The negotiators from the Players Association, it's not their job to negotiate for running backs. It's their job to negotiate for everybody. So it's not their job to work out a situation where younger running backs get paid more. Because if I'm a player at another position, I'm going to the NFLPA going, what the hell?
All right, moving forward, let's talk about wide receivers. Amari Cooper, the big prize of free agency we talked about. He's back with the Cowboys, 5 years, $100 million. Kind of sounds about right in terms of the number they agreed on there. But his quarterback, Dak Prescott, one of the ones we haven't talked about, they still haven't found the number that both sides are happy with there. Any surprises for you in terms of seeing now Ezekiel Elliott and Amari Cooper paid for? Dak still with the exclusive franchise tag. Do you think he ends up just playing out under the franchise tag? Is there a chance that could be what happens? That just seems counterproductive from a Cowboys perspective.
It didn't really work well for Washington with Kirk Cousins, did it? So, I mean, they've got to negotiate a contract with him, but I don't know how much money space they have to do it with. It's a complicated situation. They're probably wishing they had not extended Ezekiel Elliott. But as far as wide receivers, most guys haven't really signed places yet. The big news with wide receiver has been trade, not signing. And I guess part of that is because there aren't a lot of, who's the best wide receiver left on the market? Probably either Robbie Anderson or Rashad Perriman, maybe. There's not a lot of wide receivers out there. Randall Cobb did sign with Houston. So, hey, remember when Kiki QT was a thing? That was exciting. An exciting time in our past, never to be seen again. But otherwise, the wide receiver market has all been about trades.
Yeah, we talked about the two big trades, Amari Cooper getting re-signed, AJ Green getting franchised. Robbie Anderson, I was reading on Pro Football Talk that he hasn't found any sort of a market right so far. So I did want to circle back. We talked pretty extensively about DeAndre Hopkins. With Stephon Diggs, this one seems like it could be a real disaster. You know, I went on a Bills podcast, and the guys were asking me about all these different draft prospects, about the football rookie handbook, players in there, and asking about wide receivers that they think are, you know, going to fix the Bills' offense and things like that. And I kept saying to them, you know, guys, we can talk about the receivers, and there are some nice prospects there, but you got to understand that I don't think this is a team that's going to be fixed until they fix the quarterback position. So they're really betting on, you know, John Brown had a nice little season last year. He helped Josh Allen be a little bit better. They're betting on Stephon Diggs maybe having a similar sort of effect, being another person that can help upgrade Josh Allen, hopefully alleviate some of the deficiencies in the deep passing game that they've had. But this also is a Stephon Diggs that's been really frustrated with Kirk Cousins in the past, a guy who's super accurate. And I'm curious if this could be a real big blow-up situation where Diggs isn't getting the ball, he's unhappy with it, and the Bills might finally learn that Josh Allen might not be the answer no matter who you surround him with.
Yeah, I mean, at the end, it does come down to the quarterback. I think Diggs is very talented, and that gives him a really awesome threesome with John Brown and Cole Beasley. But, I mean, in the end, the Buffalo fans expect a big step forward from him. And the fact is, most quarterbacks, not all, it's not a definite rule. Most quarterbacks see their biggest improvement from year 1 to year 2, which means we've already seen it from Josh Allen. And we have. He definitely improved last year. I don't know how much better than that you're going to get.
All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll come back, talk about the tight ends and the offensive line to round out our offensive analysis. Sports Info Solutions brings you the second annual edition of the SIS Football Rookie Handbook, with scouting reports and statistical breakdowns on over 280 college football players who are likely to be drafted or signed as rookie free agents in 2020. New features this year include unique and informative NFL team pages, research deep dives by the SIS R&D team, and, for the first time ever, the NCAA version of the SIS flagship football statistic, Total Points. At Sports Info Solutions, we collect and analyze college football players like it has never been done before. Whether you're a film junkie, an aspiring analyst, or just looking for the most comprehensive information on what your NFL team's rookies did while they were playing college football, this book has what you are looking for and more. Michael Lombardi, former NFL general manager and 3-time Super Bowl winner, said, "This book is the closest fans will get to reading real NFL scouts reports, because it is detailed reporting with a complete understanding of what it takes to play in the NFL. Well done." John Park, the manager of research and strategy for the Indianapolis Colts, said, "Scouts matter because not everything that counts can be counted, and relevant data matters since not everything that can be counted counts. With that said, SIS creates relevant football data that matters." Please check out the SIS Football Rookie Handbook. It is available wherever you get books. You can get it on acta.com, ACTA.com. You can get it on Amazon.com, or you can find it at Barnes & Noble. That's the SIS Football Rookie Handbook, comprehensive scouting and analytics guide, all of the 2020 NFL Draft prospects, brought to you by Sports Info Solutions. All right, moving on to the tight end position. We were looking at Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper and kind of juxtaposing them last week. What did you make of those landing spots, Aaron?
Hunter Henry got franchised, so he'll stay with the Chargers and now apparently play with Tyrod Taylor, because the Chargers are apparently not going to go out and sign a quarterback. They're probably going to end up possibly drafting one and to compete with Taylor anyway. Every young quarterback loves his tight end, so that'll be nice for Justin Herbert to have, I guess. Austin Hooper, Cleveland, Kevin Stefanski, very heavily two tight end with Minnesota. So now he's got two tight ends there with Austin Hooper and David Njoku. I think it's a great fit for Hooper in Cleveland. Also surprised to see the Hayden Hurst trade. I'm not too surprised. He was sort of superfluous in Baltimore, but he replaces Hooper. I'm a little bummed about that because I would have loved to have seen him traded to the Patriots, but I certainly understand the idea that the Ravens did not want to do that.
Yeah, and I like the move from a Ravens perspective. I think they end up picking up a second-round draft pick in a couple of moving parts in that trade. And then they also traded for Calais Campbell as well, kind of going off in a different position. But
talking about AFC South teams getting rid of defensive, not just defensive players. Talking about AFC South teams getting rid of players for low-round draft picks, Calais Campbell.
Yeah, so I think all in all, nice moves for the Ravens there on both fronts.
Our Ravens, analytics loves the Ravens, so not a surprise that they would make moves that analytics people probably like.
Yeah, that's one thing that's kind of been consistent over the past week is seeing teams that we think of as good decision makers, teams that are kind of maybe thinking along similar lines to the way that we tend to think about things. You can see some consistency in the sort of moves that they're making. Take the Colts, for example, fitting in. We're about to talk about offensive tackles. They were able to re-sign Anthony Costanzo. You see how that fits in with Phillip Rivers. And then really addressing some of the positions that are really important. Now, they'll also make a move trading for a defensive tackle, a first-round pick, which I don't think we would approve of. So you will see some of that too. But I think as a whole, as we look at the first week of free agency with the way the running back position looks and with the way different other players have been paid, we really are starting to see kind of more of a consensus around these ideas that we've been rambling about for years on here.
A defensive tackle, but not a big fat run stopper defensive tackle, a pass rushing defensive tackle. So I'm going to at least give them credit for that.
Right. Certainly not trading for half a season of a guy that you end up having to franchise or anything like that.
That's the franchise tag that does not make sense to me at all. That is some sunk cost BS right there is what that is.
All right, but was there any other offensive line movement that you wanted to talk about? We saw Graham Glasgow, a guy that you brought up last week, get paid in a big way. That was a little bit.
Yeah, he did not come as a discount. Like I thought, this guy might come at a discount. Did not come at a discount. Still a good signing for Denver, but not a discount.
That's what you see, though, with offensive linemen. It's just so hard to find an offensive lineman on their second contract. Those guys get money. And deservedly so.
Shocked that Joe Thuney got franchised.
Yeah, swiped right out from under the market there. An unfranchising team franchise somebody. They value him, huh?
And is paying a lot of money now to two guards. They're going to have two of the top, assuming that Thuney actually signs the tag and isn't traded, they're going to have two of the top 6 or 7 guards in the league by salary.
Interesting. I wonder what that leads you to believe in terms of the way that they're building and where that offense is heading in the future.
It suggests going cheaper at the quarterback position is what it suggests.
Interesting. Or with a lot of motion. Like you were saying before, a guy that can run around out there might fit in with more of a run-based offense. All right. I didn't think there was too much. Any other really interesting offensive line movement? Anybody else that you wanted to talk about there?
I think Balaga to the Chargers is a nice addition at right tackle. Obviously, that's a team that's had a lot of offensive line problems. But again, like we talked about with Hunter Henry, I have no idea who Balaga is going to be protected.
Right. Likewise, Whitworth re-signed with the Rams, $30 million contract. Nice fit in there, certainly. Fitting in with what they're doing. Oh, I'll tell you, here was an interesting one that I wanted to talk about. Eric Flowers getting $30 million from the Dolphins.
Yeah, that's weird, man. Is Eric Flowers that much better at guard than he was at tackle? That is feels a little bit like they're negotiating with themselves.
Yeah, it does. Doesn't make a ton of sense on the surface to me. I know the Dolphins had a lot of trouble at guard. They've had some issues at that position, and if they can get better, you certainly want to get better. And it's not crazy in the context of a $200 million salary cap, but it is crazy in the context of Eric Flowers.
I understand that guys who wash out at tackles sometimes can turn into really good guards like Robert Gallery did. Even Tony Mandrich was pretty good at a guard. But it's a huge contract for that guy. That is weird. And from a Miami team that we'll get into this more next week if we talk about defensive signings, but did a lot of really good stuff on defense. That's an offensive signing that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, the Dolphins, for a second, I thought they were building to try to get in on the Brady sweepstakes themselves. But, yeah, we can talk about that more next week. Obviously, interesting moves for the Eagles on defense, bringing in guys like Javon Hargrave and Darius Slay, and other interesting moves around the league on the defensive side that we'll get to. So until next week, we will sign off. Thank you to all of our listeners. We appreciate you, and we hope that you guys are all staying safe and staying occupied a little bit these days. I know boredom's been out there, but hopefully we're helping you out a little bit to get through it. You can check out all of the content that's on footballoutsiders.com, sportsinfosolutionsblog.com. We're out there tweeting at sportsinfo_SIS. Aaron's at FB Outsiders at FO_A Shots. The Football Rookie Handbook is on bookshelves. You can order it on Amazon. They're still delivering, even if it doesn't come quite as quickly as usual. But you can order the 2020 Football Rookie Handbook by Sports Info Solutions. That's got all of our draft breakdowns. It's got our NFL team pages. It's got a little bit of everything to help get you through these slow times. So you can find that on actasports.com or on Amazon. And until next week, for my co-host Aaron Schatz, our producer Justin Stein, I'm Matt Manocherian, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.